I am a 5-year on my own business runner. I am doing a job that many doctors told me I could not do. I am an advocate for my community on top of being LGBTQ and non-binary, and I am proudly and unapologetic about every single one of those things, and I will continue to be. Whether people want to acknowledge it or not, I'm here, and I have no intentions of going away.
Hey, I'm Greg Grunberg, and welcome to Talk About It, the podcast where we focus on topics that everybody should be talking about, and hopefully they will be. Not only talking, but screaming about.
Epilepsy shouldn't keep you from doing anything that you want to do.
Talk about it. Talk about it.
While we will continue our focus on epilepsy, of course, we will also look at other health conditions and causes. Our goal is to knock down, drag out, and eliminate stigma and raise awareness. Each episode, you're going to hear from amazing advocates and champions. You will learn, as I will, about how we can all help to make a real difference.
Talking about it is important. It's all about connecting.
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Thank you for talking about it.
Thank you for talking about it.
Talk About It is sponsored by Seizures Are Signs. Seizures Are Signs is dedicated to educating those living with or caring for someone with uncontrolled seizures about the importance of early diagnosis, recognition, and treatment. To learn more, please visit seizuresaresigns.com. Seizures Are Signs is made available by Jazz Pharmaceuticals. All right, so let's jump right into this episode of Talk About It. We have had some incredible people on the podcast over the years, and this guest today just falls right in line. He is one of our closest friends that Talk About It. His name is Jake. He is so outspoken on his condition, and he does so much for the community around him. We're going to be talking about autism. He has autism and other issues and things that he is proud of. He has owned who he is. He has helped other people, and he's very open about everything. You're going to learn a lot from Jake. Jake is a very good friend of Ken, very good friend of mine, and in turn, a very good friend of yours because he is a big part of the Talk About It community. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we enjoyed sitting down and talking with our good friend, Jake. In our mission, in our ever-expanding Talk About It universe, we have been promising other conditions and other things to talk about. And so we bring in our other partner in crime, Ken Lowenberg, who has a special guest with him today. I cannot wait to get this conversation going. Let's just bring him in. What's up, Ken?
Hey, Greg.
Who is that with you? Please fill me in.
So we have here a very good friend of mine, Jake Didinsky, who is a leader in many communities, but he's a leader in the autism awareness and acceptance community. He's a leader in the DJ community. He's a leader in local politics. He's a leader in soccer stuff. He's doing all kinds of things. He's going to be a great guest. We got lots to talk about, but really excited because he can talk about it like the best of them.
I absolutely love it. Let's before we bring him in, I just want to talk to you for a second about how great this has been working out. I just want to relish in our success, relish in the success of Talk About It. Nick, you're producing an incredible show. Honestly, it's just great. We have a real flow going. Ken, you couldn't be a better partner. I'm just really pleased with how we've helped people in the community, helped build a community, and now we're going to do that for other conditions.
Absolutely. And let me also just second the praise for Nick, producer.
No, that's enough.
Fantastic.
That's enough.
All right, that's
and thank you, JJ, for our theme.
Yes.
I mean, everybody's contributing. Everybody wants to help. And you and I have had this sort of dream for so long. And it's
coming true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Let's jump into this episode because you've been telling me about this guy for a very long time. I did not realize the hyphenate and where it extends. You just mentioned way too many things that it's kind of emasculating for a guy like me. I'm the host of the show. I'm supposed to be so much more well-cultured. And my God, this guy has done it all.
So many hyphens.
I do have a lot of hyphens. I do. But Jake, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. I'm actually really thrilled to be here. Just on a quick side note, I have gotten to kind of see off on the side all of the progress Talk About It has made and have been very lucky to consider myself a part of it and to cheer you guys on every step of the way. And I've seen firsthand all of the success and like inroads you guys have made, and I know it's just the start. So I just wanted to also heap the praise and congratulate you guys on what I know is just the beginning of an incredibly still long ways to go journey.
That is incredibly kind of you to say, but I have to also thank you for being such a champion all these years, and yeah, you've just been amazing. So I pretend like I don't know who you are, but I know exactly who you are. So you're the best. Why are we talking about autism, Jake? Give us kind of the background.
Well, I think it's ironic, right? Because when we say talk about it, it's one of those things that you're like, the light bulb goes off, right? Like, why even bring this up? What's the purpose? And the purpose is because I would gander that 1 in 5 people. So like, I like to spin it like this. You have a friend, right? Odds are within your friend circle, you know someone who is on the spectrum, whether or not they are incredibly high functioning or not. It's not too hard to go many, stone skips away to find someone.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it's similar to epilepsy or any other condition that sometimes presents in different ways, which is that just because someone may not look or act a certain way does not necessarily mean that they are not dealing with things behind the scenes. And so talking about it helps shed light, helps make it more normalized. I think that just having these honest conversations helps really bring to the forefront that this is not even a hindrance. I think in a lot of ways, I view personally my autism as an advantage. And so I think when you start to take it into the scope like that, talking about it in its own right is inherently the first step towards acceptance.
For people that are not in the autism community or know really what the spectrum is and what that really means, like when did you know that you had autism or you were on the spectrum? Because honestly, I got to say, if somebody's watching this or listening to this right now, they're like, what is he talking about? When did you discover this and when was it diagnosed?
Yeah. So if I had $1 for every time I heard that, man, I'd be able to retire like literally tomorrow. And that's kind of the irony here, is because people have these preconceived notions of what a disability should look like, talk like, act like, and it's not true. And that's kind of why we talk about it, to break down those stigmas. I knew right away, right? From the time I was a young kid, I did not really engage well with people my own age. I got along with people older than me because I thought, quite frankly, people my own age just weren't as smart or able to handle a conversation as in depth as I wanted to. I wanted to talk about really hot, complex things when I was 13, like the geopolitical status of North Korea. Most 13-year-olds don't want to do that, right? But at the same time, I didn't going to go into the cafeteria in high school, middle school, because I was not really able to communicate with my peers as well. And then I was diagnosed with mitochondrial disease around age 5. And you start to...
What is that? What is that disease?
So in the most basic, simple terms humanly possible, we all remember biology class that mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell, provides like 90% of the body's ATP energy, which is great. It's broken down kind of, if you think of it like a jelly bean, into 5 individual chambers. And when one or more of those chambers doesn't work, you have a mitochondrial deficiency. Now, this is the part where I would tell you normally that as we all know, mitochondria is in every cell in the body. So if your mitochondria doesn't work right, nothing in your body works the way it's supposed to. And unlike some other conditions where, like, if you have the common cold, we usually know how to treat that. The flu, we usually know how to treat that. With this, no one person who has mitochondrial disease presents the exact same way as anybody else. And some people are severely affected, others aren't. It gets worse with age. And so it's kind of like literally asking someone, using our jelly bean example again, if I gave you 1 billion jelly beans to pick out the same jelly bean twice, your odds are slim to none.
I never miss a jelly bean. I'm just going to say that right now. Okay. I mean, that just doesn't happen. So I know I do not have this.
You would find that jelly bean.
I will find that jelly. I'm like a pig to truffles.
You'll dive in like Scrooge McDuck.
Exactly. No, but that's really interesting. So, Ken, as a very good friend of Jake's, except for his brilliant mind, what would you notice? Because I would diagnose you as brilliant. That's what I would diagnose you as. You're just a very smart guy, very articulate. I personally just would not think that you have any problem with social cues in any way. Do you still have that? I mean, is it something?
Yeah.
Really?
So the way I taught myself was I wanted to work in politics. So I had to learn how to talk to people. And the only way for me to do that was literally by putting myself in those positions. I still sometimes don't communicate as well as I would like. I still sometimes get really frustrated when like I'm trying to explain something which to me like makes very simple sense, but to somebody else maybe isn't as concrete of a black and white thing, right? I will get very flustered. I get frustrated sometimes and I will just shut down. I was with Ken one night when I did shut down and went completely nonverbal over an incident. But that isn't to say that I am the textbook case of what we would call autism spectrum disorder, right? I think that it's important to note that the reason I am such an advocate for my communities is because for every one of me, there are 5 or 6 who can't scream for all the needs that they need to get met. And so I take that very personally because I feel like, when most people think of autism, they think of people who are nonverbal. They think of people who have tics. They think of people who, present certain ways. And, you even within this interview, because you guys can't see, my hands are actually under the camera light, but I'm like actually doing this with my hand. That's how I'm dealing with my nerves of this. So I've become really good at hiding it, but it's 100% still there.
Yeah. But everybody's got something. And it's what makes you unique. It's what makes you, I'm using the word special, but, it really is. Ken, I know you. I know how compassionate and what an amazing friend you are, honestly. So when that shutdown happened, what did you do to try and, and I hate to use this because I'm sure you've heard this before in your life, Jake, where it's like, just pop out of it. And that's not, that doesn't happen. So, but how did you console or deal with it?
Well, so that was the first time, and I've known Jake for many years. It was the first time that we had that kind of an episode where he went nonverbal. And it was something that happened outside of the house and he came back. So I didn't even know what was going on, except that he just couldn't talk. And he had to sort of educate me through it while he was going through it. And what he basically pointed to was pencil and paper. And so I went and got him a pencil and paper and he was able to write. He wasn't able to talk, but he was able to write. And so he wrote and I answered and, I tried to be as calming as I could. And then afterwards, Jake sent me a whole bunch of links about what had just happened to educate me more about what happened with autism. And you asked me about what I noticed differently. I mean, Jake is an incredibly good friend of mine. He's almost like my adopted son in some ways. And so, one of the things that I would say is he's, like you said, Greg, he's incredibly smart. Like he knows what he knows. He knows politics, he knows sports, he knows everything, right? He knows so many things. And sometimes he gets very focused. So the kind of thing is that, if he's very focused and it becomes like, this is the lane that we're in right now. And if I try to if I say something that's a bit out of the lane, there's frustration that happens there, as he just described, because, so I have to realize that if we're on this topic, you can learn so much from him because he knows so much about everything that he does. But if I'm like, but what about this? He's like, no. And so it's like this, we're talking about this. And so sometimes there's frustration, sometimes, the communication style is a little bit different. So
you're describing normal human behavior.
That's right.
It's interesting, but it's heightened.
It is interesting.
It's heightened.
It's heightened.
But that's just it. Like, who says what is and isn't normal?
That's a great point.
That's just the key, right? Is just because I'm direct or I'm blunt doesn't make me different. It just means I communicate differently. And that's my normal.
Yeah.
To me, all of you guys are weird.
Yeah.
Well,
you're not wrong about that. Nick in particular, right?
I knew it was coming.
Yeah. I'm going to put a sign above Nick that just says, butt of every joke, pointy and with an arrow down. So, but talk me through, if you can, what is happening to you where you cannot speak, so that when someone else is listening to this and they're like, yes, this happens to me, they can articulate maybe in a better way to someone who has to respond or lives with them or is friends with them, to better understand what's happening.
As a side note, anytime I start dating somebody or anything like that, this is always one of the conversations, which is like, hey, I have this thing, like my communication might be slightly different. Like, please understand that this is going to be something we're going to have to work at as a team if we want to make this work, because I'm almost heightenedly aware of like how I do things. And before I answer that question, even before we got on this call, Ken was showing me one of the videos to talk about it was working on. And, I gave him my opinion on it and then had to come back in the room just to confirm that I didn't upset him. Like, and that's because I wanted the reassurance, because I was very direct. I'm like, hey, you understand, like, I'm not upset with you, right? And so I think that I personally go nonverbal, and I want to stress that it's different for everybody, right? Because the pathway for how you get there isn't always the same, but there's different types. We could talk about autistic burnout. We can talk about autistic episodes. All these things carry with them different kinds of weight. But essentially what happened is my brain and body became so overwhelmed and so unable to just function that it got to a place where I just couldn't. And at that point, I was so self-aware that it was happening. I needed to like Ken said, I was kind of trying to talk him through, like, hey, this is what I need, because I can maybe get something out, but you're not going to get the verbal that you need from me to get us through this. And you obviously, Ken very well, and being Ken was all about it. But I think that for those within the sound of my voice, and I do like to listen to myself talk, so I hope it is many.
You have a good voice, by the way. He does.
You
do have a good voice. Yeah.
I think that what's important to note is that if you have a friend who is on the spectrum, and if they have opened up to you about that, that is a huge, huge, huge thing, a leap for them to do that, right? Like, it's a very personal thing. Some people are more open about it than others, but if they are choosing you to be someone they are confiding in, one, take it as like something like an honored moment, right? Because I only let as many people know as I do, because I have to be able to work. But within that realm, those people also know that if I'm having a moment, like, I don't necessarily want to talk about it in that exact moment. There will become a time when I will address it on my terms. But if you try to come and pull it out of me, it's just going to end poorly. And that's kind of my advice, is like anybody with a disability, we're really, really good most of the time about letting people know, if we're able to, what we need. And we really, really usually don't like it if people just assume what we need without talking to us first. And that is the key here, right? Is that if I tell you, hey, I need X, 100% go and do X. But if I tell you I need X and then you assume that I need Y, we're going to have a conversation when I feel better about why we don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because, we're talking about you getting so overwhelmed that you're nonverbal. So anybody that's on the spectrum may not be able to, a lot of people may not be able to articulate it the way that you're articulating it. So they may never be able to explain it.
Coming up on Talk About It.
But for me, it's just kind of how my brain is wired. And also, this is the other condition I have. And if this is a deal breaker for you, like, let me know now. Otherwise, because I don't want to be, 3.5 years into a relationship and then somebody's like, I don't really know. I'm proudly from North Philadelphia and want to be upfront.
I just wanted to jump out and talk about talking about it. I know we talk about that a lot here on the show, but in this case, our guest is extremely articulate. He's able to talk about his condition, and not everybody is. And especially at the beginning of your diagnosis, you may not know what's going on with you. In the epilepsy world, for example, you're having absence seizures or having little moments, and you don't know how to articulate exactly what's happening because you're the one that's having them. But don't let that stop you from engaging in the conversation. Talk about it with your doctor, with the nurse practitioner, with caregivers, anybody that will listen. The more you talk about it, the better you'll be able to explain exactly what's going on. And even if you can't articulate it perfectly, like our guest, the person that you're talking to, the physician, has enough experience that they're going to be like, wait, you just said something very important, and maybe this is what's going on. Talk about it. The first step to getting whatever your condition is under control is understanding what it is, number one, and engaging in the conversation is the way that that's going to happen. You talked about dating. When do you let that person know? And I'm sure it's second date.
And the reason for me is I want the people I have in my life to know, like, look, if there's, first off, if we make it to a second date, it means that I like you. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and at that point, I need you to know this is how I show my appreciation. It may not always be through cuddling and things, right? Like, I don't necessarily like being touched a lot. Like, it's just like not my thing. And for some people, that's a deal breaker. But for me, it's just kind of how my brain is wired.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's usually, this is how my brain works. Please understand. And also, this is the other condition I have. And if this is a deal breaker for you, like, let me know now. Otherwise, like, we're in this, let's go. Because I don't want to be, 3.5 years into a relationship and then somebody's like, I don't really know. Like, I'm proudly from North Philadelphia and want to be upfront.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here so frustrated right now, Jake, because I can't believe we waited this long to have you on the podcast. I am not kidding. Like, what you just said. Thank you.
And it's almost like I knew you were coming. I have my Pittsburgh Pirates shirt on.
You may be the only Pirates fan in all of existence, but someone's got to do
it. So tell me when you decided to be so vocal, such an advocate, to take measures to, to apply that to the politics that you're involved in and really to represent, this huge, huge community of people that are dealing with, on autism or being on the spectrum.
Yeah. So one of the things I pride myself on is I'm an advocate for all disabilities. And the reason is the following, 97% of the time, people with disabilities, we're like completely forgotten about. A footnote in statistics of almost every congressional report until one of us gets angry enough to make enough noise for someone to care, just long enough to basically quiet us down, and then we get forgotten about. I got to a place where I got really tired of that. Me and my friends and others who deal with mitochondrial disease, ASD, my ex-girlfriend had epilepsy. Like, we kind of all looked around and were like, at what point do we just need to take this into our own hands? Because I believe that putting a face to some of these things really helps hammer it home. I use the sex trafficking idea, right? You could tell somebody the number of people that are currently involved in sex trafficking, but when they see it firsthand and you put it in front of their face, it's a lot harder to ignore it.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the homeless crisis that we're dealing with in this country. I mean, you stop for a second and have a conversation with these human beings that are not a statistic, that are not a number, and every story is different. There may be major, developments that they all are dealing with, addiction and mental illness and all that. But you cannot just lump them in and say, oh, the number's now this and the number's that, and oh, look how filthy and look at the dirt. These are people. These are human beings. Putting a face, putting a personality, putting a name to it, and that's when it hits home. And also with politicians, unfortunately, they're so against something and they just can put it out of their minds. It's only a dollar amount and it's just an allocation, and until someone in their family gets affected. And then suddenly now I'm going to hold the torch and I'm going to really stand on this soapbox for that one that I love.
It also reminds me of like Judy Heumann, until Judy Heumann was organizing the sit-ins, then the ADA was passed.
Yes.
It took that, good trouble to get that kind of stuff done.
They're in office to help. That they're representing not just the people that don't have conditions, they're representing everyone. And they need to represent and hear everyone. And so what have you done? Talk about the big things that you've done. And really, I mean, I know, you're a modest guy, but really the things that you're most proud of.
Yeah. Well, currently I serve on the Intellectual Developmental Disabilities Commission in Montgomery County, Maryland. I'm the secretary of that commission. And I'm really, really proud of that just because it allows me to make change locally in my county. Every other year, I lobby on the Hill with the UMDF, the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. We go up there, we push for bills. Most recently, on President's Day weekend, my boyfriend and I went up and lobbied in Annapolis for a bunch of different bills regarding funding for, ensuring education and IEPs. I'm a big advocate at school board meetings for making sure parents know the difference between IEPs and 504 plans, and there is a massive difference.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
I also, having graduated from Falls Church High School, I'm very proud of the fact that we finally got them the renovation for the school that is 40 years past due in Fairfax County. And that only happened because that school as like a demographic, it's a lot of not English speaking parents. So we started fighting for them. And by the way, they're one of one school in the county in Fairfax, one of the largest school districts in the country that has a physical disabilities program. 55 years since the last like renovation. It's not how we do things. So I think for me though, like if you had to have me point to one thing that I'm most proud of, it's literally that I get to be myself, a walking, living, breathing example that just because you have a disability doesn't mean you can't do anything you want. Like you need to see it. You're looking at it. I am a 5-year on my own business runner. I am doing a job that many doctors told me I could not do. I am an advocate for my community on top of being LGBTQ and non-binary. And I am proudly and unapologetic about every single one of those things. And I will continue to be. And for me, I think that is probably what I am most proud of, is that whether people want to acknowledge it or not, I'm here and I have no intentions of going away.
Okay, well, stop yelling at me, first of all. That's awesome,
Seriously,
man.
see what I have to put up with?
I know.
Yeah,
I don't know how you deal with this guy. What an inspiration, man. So what would you say to somebody who's listening to this right now, no matter what they're dealing with? I don't care what it is. What can they do in their little way, outside of talking about it, because that's the biggest first step, I think. But what can they do to move the needle?
Do this in 2 or 3 parts if it's okay, because I want to speak directly first to middle school, high schoolers.
He's already renegotiating his contract, Nick. It's incredible. He's like me on TV. I'll do this, but I gotta have this size trailer. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
For the middle schooler, the high schoolers out there, if you're hearing this and you're things are tough, listen, I was you. I get it. Things may seem dark. Things may seem bleak. You may seem like everything is crashing in around you. I remember those days, and I really wish I had somebody in my corner then to tell me you're going to get through it. Hi, I'm the somebody in your corner to tell you you're going to get through it. What I want to tell you guys specifically is that whether you're LGBTQ, have a disability, are different, don't like your body, whatever it is, you are perfect just the way you are. And it may not seem like it now, but trust me, you are.
I know I am.
10 years from now, you're going to look back on these days and, you may say, man, that was a really rough time. But what I would encourage you to do is find your people. They're there. Find that one person, those 2 people, those 3, 4 friends, whatever it is that you can go to. If you feel like you need to talk to somebody, do that. Mental health is a serious problem in this country. Don't be afraid to seek help. You would be shocked at the number of people who are here and ready to help you.
Amen, man.
For the friends of people who feel like they have friends who are struggling, be supportive. Just a simple text checking in. Hey, dude, we haven't seen you at any of our gatherings. Are you okay? That goes a long way. That's the difference. It's literally that. A simple 2-second text. I mean, not to get too sentimental, but one of my friends we lost in high school, and it was a rough time. And one of the things I look back on is wishing that I had been more supportive or tried to reach out more, because I didn't know what he was going through.
Yeah.
And that's just it. It's a simple text.
Yeah. And it's even with people that present themselves as being very strong and very on top of what's going on. Sometimes those are the people that in the quiet times behind closed doors have the hardest episodes of depression, and they keep things to themselves. I saw this thing, somebody was talking about having a code that you can have with a buddy. So if I texted you, Nick, and I just texted you, hey man, just checking in, #8, that means I need you to call me back right now. I need you right now. And even if it's just listening to me, not commenting or whatever, there are certain people, I mean, Nick can attest to my venting with him. You just need to be able to talk to somebody. Doesn't have to be on a platform, doesn't have to be on a soapbox, but just know that you're not alone. What you just said is so valuable, Jake. It's just that text, getting that from somebody going, oh, okay, there's somebody out there that cares.
That's important. That's the first step, making it known. But actionable steps are important too,
Coming up on Talk About It.
Just because I don't have epilepsy doesn't mean that I don't know somebody who does. Just because my issue may not be front and center doesn't mean I can't be an ally for that issue.
Yeah.
Right? This is a rising tide lifts all ships community, guys. And just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean you should not be out at the front lines screaming to get help for it.
If you're struggling, if you're listening to this, it is very important that you keep the conversation going. You're not alone. You are anything but alone. Everybody wants to help you. It's really, really true. It may be hard to see it and hard to hear it, but you need to reach out. You need to talk to whoever you have around you. And if you don't have anybody and you really feel that isolated, you need to go to 988lifeline.org. It is the place to start. You need to talk to somebody because it's only going to get better from here. And it's okay to admit that you're not as strong as you wish you were. Everybody's in that situation every single day. We all want to be in control. We all want to say that we're strong, but it's okay to admit that we're not because the truth is we're not, and everybody's going through something. So talk to others around you and realize that there is help and there's love and people that care about you. And they might be right around the corner. They might be right next to you. They might be right in front of your face. But unless you talk about it, unless you admit that you need help or you need someone to talk to this, to your situation about, it's not going to happen. A lot of people shy away until they're asked for help. So don't be above asking for help because it's out there. So talk about it. All right, so let's get back to the interview. Jake is just an incredible guest, and he's been through it. So learn from Jake and know that you're really not alone. Yeah, it's also interesting when you look back and you see, man, we've really come a long way in this way or that way. Those things didn't just happen. Those changes didn't just occur. People got involved. People expressed their frustration with this or that in their community. I don't care if it's just, a billboard that's up that you don't want to see it, whatever. Get involved.
How many times have you heard call your congressman, call your senator? I would argue follow the legislation happening in your state. Know what's happening at the local level. Know what's happening at the state level. Like, all those meetings are open to the public. You are allowed to go. You are allowed to advocate.
Yeah,
even at the school level. It
does matter, and you can make change. So wait, you were talking about you were going to do this on 2 or 3 tiers. Yeah. So that's the first tier.
So the first tier I want to talk about is to the parents, because I think a lot of times when we're talking about disabilities, LGBTQ, or anything really, parents have a big role to play too. I am someone with a disability who is LGBTQ, and my mom, like most parents who have kids with disabilities, had to learn on the fly because I was her oldest. She was not planning to have a child with a disability, but she sure as heck became an advocate for one overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, and in some ways, I think that I have this incredibly deep appreciation for the fact that my mother, as a single mother, worked a full-time job in government contracts and raised 3 boys with mitochondrial disease. That does not mean that, we always agree on everything, because we most certainly don't. And she bubble wrapped me at times because I was her oldest. What I would say to parents is that there's going to be this, crossroads moment multiple times where you're going to be faced with do I let my child go and do X? Do I let my child go and do Y? Or do I, try to protect them from potentially, doing something that may not go as well for them or that hurts them? And my response is let them try, because even if they try and fail, they will have felt like they had the opportunity. Don't take the opportunity away from them.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than being told you can't. If I can't and I make that decision, I felt like I was involved in the process.
100%.
Parents, be supportive.
Yeah, because it also it begins these bad habits of feeling insecure, feeling less than, and whether you know it or not, you might be like, no, I can do it, but there's always in the back of your mind, oh, I wasn't allowed to even try to do that back then. I wasn't even, it's a pattern thing that you're setting as parents. But I love speaking to the parents. Okay, so what's the next tier?
And the third one is just for the general populace, and this is probably the most important, which is that just because you may not be dealing with a situation doesn't mean it isn't there, right? Like, just because I don't have MS doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't. Just because I don't have epilepsy doesn't mean that I don't know somebody who does. Just because my issue may not be front and center doesn't mean I can't be an ally for that issue.
Yeah.
Right. This is a rising tide lifts all ships community, guys. It's going to take all of us to fix everything. And just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean you should not be out at the front lines screaming to get help for it. And so my recommendation to the general populace is we need everybody, especially allies, all of these things, to be willing to stand there and go to bat for us, because sometimes we can't do it ourselves.
Yeah, no, if you're listening to this or watching this and you go, well, I got my own stuff to deal with. What are you talking? I can't educate myself on all. But guess what? You can educate yourself just enough to know that you should have an understanding or sympathy and not be ignorant. Ignorance comes when you don't educate yourself. And in the epilepsy community, it's all about knowing what to do if somebody has a seizure and knowing that you don't stick anything in their mouth, knowing that you turn them on their side and that the seizure will most likely end within 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So, but what to do, who to call, it takes a second just to educate. We sit and spend hours, countless hours, watching episodes of TV shows. I mean, you can take 10 minutes to research something. If you're listening to this right now and you're like, he mentioned MS. I don't know much about MS. I know you don't have it and whatever, but you mentioned it. I'm going to look, what does that mean? What is these two words? What do they mean? Just take that second. Mitochondrial disease. Look it up. Yes, bad stuff rises to the top. You Google stuff, you're going to hear nightmare stories. But in that nightmare, you're going to read and learn, oh, that's what it is. Just educate yourself. And again, it doesn't take a lot. But when given the opportunity to join, you don't have to be a member of that tribe, of that group to support. You can be a good friend of whatever community that you go, God, man, they're really having it tough. Lend your time. Lend your voice. Say something. Speak up, because we all are in this together. You're 100% right.
Yeah, so I think it's important that you bring up you don't put a spoon in someone who's having a seizure's mouth, because when I was a kid and my girlfriend, the high school girlfriend, had a seizure, that was the first thing the teacher went to do. I had to tell the teacher, like, hey, yeah, no, like that's not the move. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by, it's the simple littlest things that make a huge difference. And, obviously it was jarring for all the kids in the class who had never seen that. Okay.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we have to make it worse. Yeah. And just the simple educational knowledge of let's not stick a spoon in the mouth. It's that simple.
And by the way, if
literally 2-minute TikTok.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, well, where am I going to get all this information? Go to talkaboutitonvideo.com. We have a series of educational videos, mainly geared towards the epilepsy community, but now we have one talking about, the comorbidity of autism and epilepsy and how these things interact, because there's a lot of crossover there, but we're going to be getting into other conditions. So go there. Go to talkaboutitonvideo.com and watch some of these videos and educate yourself.
Real quick, Jake, you mentioned TikTok, and it reminded me of this subject. It seems to be kind of in vogue right now for people who are trying to be influencers of various types on social media to self-diagnose and try to be like an autism influencer. Does that bother you? Or, what is the diagnosis process? Can you self-diagnose with autism, or is that something that needs to happen professionally?
Give me an example of what you're talking about, though, on Instagram. Like, so people are going.
I know exactly what he's talking about.
Oh, no, I don't. So what is?
Yeah. So like a lot of times what you'll see is, oh, I'm kind of quirky, so I must be autistic. Or, like it's a weird balancing act, like Nick. And the hard part here is that most adults will have a hard time getting a diagnosis of being on the spectrum if they were not diagnosed as kids, because
interesting.
It's kind of a weird battle, because most people just assume either you are or you aren't. Now, as we learn more and as we realize that this spectrum is incredibly wide ranging, it becomes easier and easier to kind of see, a psychiatrist who might be willing to, but it's also incredibly expensive. And that in its own right is a barrier. And so my belief on it is basically this: if you're going to self-diagnose yourself with autism, become an expert on it and be ready to, go to bat for it. Because my belief is that I think a lot of people are undiagnosed on the spectrum. I do. I think that it's more common than people think. I think that we have been told, as people who are on the spectrum, that we should try to conform to what, the world views as normal, and that we should try to act more what like the world views as normal, and then it's improper for us to be this quirky kind of like, you know, I don't know the word for it, but like things that make us different. But for me, I view being on the spectrum as an advantage. I was telling Ken, it's like I'm playing 4-dimensional chess and everyone else is playing jump rope.
Yeah.
And I'm incredibly proud of that.
I can't do either. I can't jump rope and I can't play chess. So you're way ahead of me.
Neither can I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that it starts bothering me more when people who self-diagnose use it for like a monetary advantage or try to parlay it into something that's not for good. If you want to self-diagnose yourself and turn your channel into an all about this sort of like living with autism thing, you go for it. Like, I don't care how the word gets out there, if the word gets out there, but if you have bad intentions or malintent, don't. Just don't.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Nick. It's so true. And I wasn't even aware that there are these people that are doing. And but by the way, if you're on social media and you have a condition and you're talking about that all the time, that's exactly what we encourage people to do. We were talking about Stanzi Potenza, who was on the podcast, and she's out there and she uses humor and she uses conversation and these little sketches and skits that she does to talk about her epilepsy. She's hilarious. She's a great actress. But I mean, I love that you brought that up because there are people out there that are taking advantage of communities, and that's something to be aware of and watch out for.
It seems like sometimes it's being used as like they're almost leaning into a character.
People who also have autism or don't, using it as a shield for acting poorly, right? Like, I have on numerous occasions encountered people who have done something very, very, very not great and said, oh, well, it's my autism. No, baby. No, like it's, up to a point, once okay, but 6, 7, 8 times we got to work on that.
Yeah.
And that's just like human interaction. So my belief is autism, no autism it's not a shield. We talk about it, we understand how to interact, and then we figure out how to go forward together. Because if it continues to become an issue, then it's not, this is a thing that hinders me. This is I'm taking advantage of something and not trying to actually grow.
Jake, I wish you were passionate about what you're talking about. You're amazing, man. I'm sorry to say that over and over again, but I really am so happy. I can't thank you enough for coming on today, man. Any parting words? Anything you want to leave us with?
Yeah, low key, huge fan of yours and like heroes. So like, just felt like I wanted to say that.
Why did we start with that? Come on, man.
I actually, like, off tangent, like, it's one of my favorite shows because I feel like it represents kind of what it's like living with a disability in a lot of ways. Because in the show itself, a lot of people are portrayed as being different or having these unique skills, and they're kind of told at times not to, and then over time they realize that it makes them stronger versus a hindrance. And so that show personally, like, low-key has meant a lot to me.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
But like my parting words would just be this. First off, thank you for having me. Like, this has been one of the coolest things like I can say I've been a part of.
Love it.
That my job, like a DJ, I run an event that employs mostly people who are disabled in nightlife. Like, our entire event is run by people who are LGBTQ or trans or disabled or neurodiverse, and we give them the opportunity to run it in nightlife, and we've been doing it for 5 years. And so my closing words would be this, and this is what I tell people when I DJ. When someone comes into the nightclub, I don't know what's going on with them outside of those doors, but what I do know is that for those 5 hours, they are with me in that space. And during that time, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they have a good time and forget whatever the heck it was that was bothering them when they came in.
It's awesome.
Same thing applies to real world interactions, which is talk to people, love one another, and who knows, you might just be surprised to learn that there's more to meets the eye than most people.
Absolutely, 100%. You're amazing, dude. Keep up everything that you're doing. I wish I could say keep up this or that, but you're doing it all, and you really are an example, a prime example. You're an inspiration, and I know that that's okay. That's it. I'm not going to give you any more praise. I don't want your hair color to turn any brighter than it is. But you really are. I thank you so much for making the time, Ken. You were 1,000% right, and I'm so glad that Ken said so little. I mean, that's maybe Maybe that's why this episode was so good.
That's why it was so good, because I didn't say anything. Because I have three masters. They don't need to hear me.
Exactly. No, thank you again. And just getting back to what we were talking about at the very beginning here, thank you for Nick and Ken for just being a part of this journey. It gets better and better and better with people like you, Jake. So this has been awesome. For more episodes like this, please subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends about it. This is how we talk about it, and we're going to be expanding and talking about so much more in the coming episodes. So we will see you again very soon. Well, that's a wrap on another episode of Talk About It. Remember, we're all human. We're all dealing with something, and a little compassion every day can change so many lives. Thank you to our special guests. Special thanks to our sponsor, SeizuresAreSigns.com. Thank you to J.J. Abrams for our theme music. Thank you to Nick Marzak for producing, directing, editing, and incidental music. On behalf of my fellow producers, Ken Lowenberg and Nick Marzak, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you're not watching, go to talkaboutitonvideo.com to watch these episodes. They're now on video as well. I'm Greg Grunberg. Don't forget to talk about it, and I will see you next time.
This podcast is a production of the Talk About It Company.